So let's start with this big question, because it's really at the heart of everything we're about to unpack. What is the real cost of silence? When something wrong happens and the people with the power to act choose to do nothing, what's the final price that gets paid? The story of Tamar gives us an answer, and it's a tragic one. So, where does this all take place? We're in the court of one of the most famous kings in history, King David. But this isn't a story about his greatest hits or his military victories. No, we're looking at a really dark chapter that involves 3 of his own children.
First up, we have Tamar. She's a princess, and she's known throughout the kingdom for her dignity, for her integrity. She is the innocent person right at the center of this whole tragedy. And then there's Amnon. He's Tamar's half-brother, and he's the king's firstborn son, the heir. He becomes, well, obsessed with Tamar. He tells everyone it's this deep, all-consuming love. But as we're about to see, his actions tell a very, very different story.
Okay, so let's just get this straight right from the jump. What Amnon called love, it was never love. Not for a second. It was all about power. It was about possession, about control. That affection he talked about was just a cover story, a mask for his real, violent intentions. And this is where everything just goes horribly wrong. This is the moment his deception explodes into violence, and it changes the history of this family and the kingdom forever.
I mean, the contrast here is just staggering. On the one hand, you have his claim, "I love her," but on the other hand, you have the brutal reality of his actions. He tricks her, lures her to his rooms, and then he ignores her pleas and violently assaults her. And then, and this part is just chilling, the second he's done, his supposed love turns to pure hatred. He literally has her thrown out. So, what happens to Tamar after this? It's an absolute catastrophe. She is publicly shamed, emotionally shattered, and forced to live in a state of isolated ruin. The text itself calls it desolation. Her entire future was just destroyed in that moment. But here's where this personal horror story becomes a story about a massive institutional failure. Because now, all eyes turn to the one person who could actually do something about it, her father, the king. And you can see the failure happen in 3 simple, awful steps. First, the crime occurs. Second, the king is told what happened. We hear he was furious, absolutely livid. But the third step, the response? Nothing. He does absolutely nothing. No accountability for his son, no justice for his daughter. He simply chooses silence. And this reveals a really hard, undeniable truth. By doing nothing, King David wasn't being neutral. His inaction was an action, a choice that protected the abuser and completely abandoned the victim. Now, you might think the king's failure to act would just make the problem go away, but that's not what happens. It just allowed the poison of that injustice to spread, and it started festering in the heart of another of his sons. And that brings us to Absalom, Tamar's full brother. He takes his devastated sister into his home to protect her, but the advice he gives her is just heartbreaking. He says, "Be quiet. He is your brother." Now, he wasn't dismissing her pain. He was basically acknowledging the bitter reality. The system, led by their own father, had already failed her. Think about that. For 2 full years, Absalom watched his sister live in shame while his brother walked around free without a single consequence. 2 years of official, deafening silence from the throne. So in that vacuum of justice left by the king, Absalom's grief and anger just simmered, and then they hardened into a plan for revenge. He bided his time, waited for the perfect moment, and then he had Amnon murdered at a feast. Violence answered violence. And here we see this core principle at work. The initial terrible act, the assault on Tamar, was never dealt with. And because of that, it didn't stay contained. It was allowed to multiply. It grew into resentment, into a conspiracy, and finally into a brother murdering a brother, tearing the royal family apart from the inside out. So why are we talking about this ancient, brutal story? Because the dynamics at play here, power, abuse, silence, injustice, they're timeless. This isn't just a piece of history. It's a powerful case study with lessons that still hit home today. And I want to be 100% clear about something. This narrative never, ever blames Tamar. She protested, she fought, she was overpowered.
Her story is not a cautionary tale about her weakness. It is an indictment of the profound moral failures of the powerful men around her. When you boil it all down, this story leaves us with 4 powerful takeaways. First, silence always protects the abuser. Second, injustice is never free. It creates a debt that will eventually be paid. Third, if you don't deal with evil, it multiplies. And finally, that even when people and systems fail victims, the act of telling the story itself ensures their suffering is seen and not forgotten. This is the ultimate warning of Tamar's story, especially for anyone in a position of leadership or authority. To delay justice, to choose your own comfort over a difficult confrontation, is to deny justice entirely. David's delay cost him 2 sons and shattered his family. And this brings us right back to that central question. This story forces us to look at our own lives, our own communities, our own institutions. When we are confronted with wrongdoing, will we have the courage to pursue that difficult path of accountability? Or will we choose the easier path, the comfortable but very costly path of silence?
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, like, and share.